was out there thinking, wow, how can the accommodation in the UK for student housing be such poor quality and the accommodation in America be better than my mum and dad's house? When you're dealing with individual landlords or smaller developers, the sites are a lot smaller, so you don't necessarily get to drive the same amount of value that you would through a bigger bulk purchase. We only suggest furniture that will stand up to the tests of a more sort of commercially grade environment. We're not only working with the larger scale developers in the country, we're also working with a lot of independent landlords as well.
Hello, I'm Ben Wilson, the host of the Developers Club podcast. Today I'm joined by the founder and CEO of LOFT, Ben Hall, a business many developers have no doubt will already know and have worked with. What started out as a student-funded venture back in 2003 is now one of the most recognisable names in furnishing in the residential market, with full delivery, installation and aftercare services across PRS, BTR and PBSA. So Ben, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So let's go back to the beginning and where did the original idea for buy-to-let furnishings come from?
So I went to university in 1997 and I was lucky enough to get a full grant to go to uni, and as part of my university course, people that were on a full grant had the opportunity to apply to go and study in America. So I was successfully chosen to go to America for 6 months and study, and when I went over there, it was like the level of quality of accommodation was just another level. And I was out there thinking, wow, how can the accommodation in the UK for student housing be such poor quality and the accommodation in America be better than my mum and dad's house? So while I was out there, I was thinking, wow, there's a real opportunity to improve the quality of student housing. And obviously I'm from Manchester originally and there's 5 universities there. So I came back from university and had an idea that I was going to start a business to basically improve the quality of residential interiors for student housing. That's how it started.
Amazing. And the rest is history.
The rest is history, literally.
So Ben, what did those sort of early years look like for the company as you were sort of growing it from day one?
So I came out of university with a student loan, 3 student loans, about 15K. And my dad at the time had a second-hand furniture and antiques business, and it wasn't going particularly well because as I'd come out of university, it was like the beginning of the flatpack furniture era. And so he offered me the opportunity to take a shop lease that he had for 6 months. It was coming to an end. And I used the money to open a shop in Manchester called Buy-to-Let Furnishings. And the plan was that I would remove the old furniture and sell it in his shop, and I would put the new furniture in. So it was like a win-win. And it literally just hit the ground running.
Really? From there?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So from those early days, how does that now shape your business still?
Yeah, so replenishment is the essence of the business. So from the day one when we first started it, the removal and replacement in between residential tenancy has always been our sort of the heartbeat of our company, and that is something that's remained up until this day.
Yeah. And in terms of, so you started out in Manchester, and how have you gone from Manchester based to suddenly growing, becoming a national supplier?
Well, a lot of the contracts that were coming our way in the student housing sector were nationwide contracts, and we were furnishing a lot of property in London and Birmingham and the southeast, and we decided that we were going to open a showroom and a depot in London because it was just a natural expansion. It's a requirement that everybody in the property sector needs, furnishings and replenishment and waste management. So it's all been organic. It's been based on marketplace demand. We caught the buy-to-let wave, and then we caught the student wave, and now we've caught the build-to-rent wave.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the market has definitely changed, and sort of vanilla buy-to-let, people talk about it sort of not being how it used to be.
Yeah.
But there's new HMOs, or obviously everyone's going wild for HMOs. Do you do lots of HMOs?
Yeah, we've been HMOs were the sort of first sort of niche property type that we were ever involved in, because Manchester's such a big student city.
Yeah.
A lot of our first shop was in Chorlton, which is a big student area, which is near to Fallowfield and Widdington and the famous student areas in Manchester. So HMO and co-living has been something we've been involved in since day one.
Yeah. And was there a particular time during the business when you realised you were onto something and it was going to scale very quickly?
The first couple of months were very quiet, but because we had the domain name buy-to-let-furnishings.co.uk, this was in 2003, and I think the buy-to-let mortgage came out in 2002. So we were just piggybacking off the back of the buy-to-let mortgage, and then obviously Manchester, after the bomb went off in 97, the city completely rebuilt itself and a lot of residential developers came in, and that's sort of 2005, 2006 is when we really started to sell furniture packages to investors who were buying apartments to rent out in the city centre.
And the market was rampant in 2006, 2007, wasn't it? I remember I was an agent at the time in London. It was just like prices were just flying up every month.
Yeah, and you know, there'd never been the volume of property coming onto the Manchester market, the Liverpool market, you know, the Northwest where we were based. And and then, you know, we were just furnishing more and more and more apartments. And then in sort of 2008, when the financial crisis came, the developers couldn't sell the properties. So we furnished more apartments than ever. So the business grew again. But then, you know, we made a mistake. We gave out a little bit too much credit and the banks pulled the plug because they got cold feet. So the developers, the banks basically owned the properties and we lost a lot of money in bad debt. And that's when we sort of pivoted and went into the student furniture side of things around 2008, 2009.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. And at what stage, when you're doing these, getting involved in the developments, what stage do you start to get involved? How early on in the process are you there?
Well, we like to try and get involved around the planning stage if we can, because it's important. I'm talking about build to rent now. It's important for build to rent developers to consider the brand of their residential development or the brand of their chosen operator. And then we try and reflect the brand identity of these developments or the operator through interior design and furnishing. But 9 times out of 10, we get involved at sort of post-planning, funding or pre-funding stage. And that is for us the best time to get involved, because then we can really add a lot of value to the way that the apartments are designed.
Yeah. Right. And what are the biggest mistakes that you see people make? You must have seen lots of fantastic developments, lots of terrible ones.
I think the majority of architects and developers make difficult choices for interior designers when it comes to M&E.
Yeah.
Radiators often in bizarre locations in the apartment, and TV points often in strange locations, and plug sockets and things like that. I think that, you know, if you really want to design an apartment well, the location of the TV point, the plug sockets, the radiators is a really, really big piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I sometimes struggle with that as a developer.
It's wrong still today, 9 times out of 10.
Well, they're often on different sets of plans, so that you don't see the crossover. And I always sometimes say to my architect, I know it's not the done thing, but can we just put the radiators on the electrical plan, please? Because then there's no cock-ups.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, I feel your pain. And obviously you're doing these huge installs. I mean, how do you manage that? Because that must be, it's about hard enough for me doing one dressing, let alone however many you do.
We're an importer and distributor.
Yeah.
And a lot of the guys that we've got in the business have been involved in the business from the very early stages. So we just have a very capable project management team, and we've got an infrastructure that supports large-scale importing and distribution and installation. A lot of the guys that we've got on the installation team have been with us for 15 years or more. My operations director was our first employee. You know, we've got a team of people that are very experienced and very committed at specifically furnishing apartments. It is definitely a lot harder than it looks.
No, I'm sure.
Yeah, a lot more complicated.
And how many of you are there now? How big's the team?
I think we've got around 100 people at the moment.
Yeah, big.
And that went up to, I think the most we've ever had is about 135. But then in the summertime, we have a lot of temporary staff as well to do the student installs. Yeah.
And you also deal with a lot of build to rent. So how has that changed the way developers think about interiors particularly?
I think build to rent changed the residential property sector because it considers the resident as a customer rather than as a tenant that is a bit of a pain. So the interiors are more of a customer focused quality, and
So a higher standard.
much higher standard in terms of design and quality, because obviously the trick to success in build to rent is renting the apartments quickly and improving the retention rate and extending that rental period to 3 years or 5 years rather than I think the mean average is 18 months.
Yeah.
But the check-in and the check-out is where the expense comes in. So build to rent, I'm hoping, will improve the quality of residential interiors from social housing all the way up to prime.
Well, it's definitely becoming, I mean, if you look at BlackRock, I think we've just bought a load buying into the market,
Yeah.
Lloyds, so hopefully you're going to ride that wave.
Well, those type of corporate institutions are our customers.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
And in terms of tenants more generally, what do they expect? What are like the standard things now from a furnishing point of view that you advise to have?
I think because rents have increased so much, I think the residents' expectations have increased also.
Yeah.
And now, with social media, Instagram, Pinterest, stuff like that, and the magazines that everyone sees, everybody has an expectation of what their apartment could or should look like. The demands of residents now are probably as strong as ever, but I always feel like that's kind of dictated by the amount of money that they're paying. The budget for the furniture depends on the rental income or the
Absolutely,
yield on the property. Yeah. So they definitely have higher expectations as you go up the ladder with the rental income. Yeah.
And I know myself as a developer, it is hard to balance quality, design, and value. So, how do you help developers do that?
Style, price point, durability, sustainability are the 4 sort of like key drivers. Yeah. That's just about understanding trends and buying well and buying ethically and consciously. We've been working with factories in Asia and India and Eastern Europe for a very long time now. So we've got a really good design team who are quite forward thinking, and we just make sure that we're in front of the trends. We go to all the international furniture exhibitions, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so in terms of when you're furnishing a build to rent scheme, what are the differences? I know you've said that it's generally a higher standard. Is there any other differences between that and student accommodation or normal?
Build to rent, you're having a conversation with one institutional landlord that owns one complete block of apartments. When you're dealing with individual landlords or smaller developers, the sites are a lot smaller, so you don't necessarily get to drive the same amount of value that you would through a bigger bulk purchase. There are differences with the way that build-to-rent developers and operators consider their brand, which is it's becoming more and more important. Sort of branded residences, having the brand. I'm not sure that that's so important to a build-to-sell developer, for instance, or somebody that is running a HMO portfolio. Some of the HMO guys are pretty good.
Starting to brand, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's important. I do think it's important, and we always advise, when we're discussing a project with somebody, like, can you send us your brand guidelines? Build to rent is something that is continuing to grow. I think the Knight Frank report came out today, 1.1 billion invested in Q1 of this year so far. So when that amount of investment is around, the interiors and the quality of the interiors is paramount to the development success from an NOI perspective.
And I know that something that LOFT talks about a lot is people first design and planet first procurement. Yeah. So what does that look like on a day-to-day basis?
People first design is about putting the residents' comfort and well-being at the forefront of our interior design. And it also means that the whole ecosystem of LOFT is considering the people that work in the factories that make the furniture that we work with, the employees of LOFT, the customers, and then the end user. So we're trying to put people at the forefront of all of the decisions that we make when it comes to procuring furniture, designing spaces, installing furniture, and then also making sure that at the end the resident is comfortable and we have an impact on their well-being. If you've got a comfortable mattress, you sleep well, a comfortable sofa, you can live nice. And if it's spaced well and it's functional, we're having it's a bigger impact than you might think, the reach. Yeah. And then the planet first thing is more of a conscious effort just to make sure that the way that we're procuring the furniture, the way we're transporting the furniture, the way the furniture's packaged, the way we do our recycling initiatives, our tree planting initiatives are all just essentially just trying to set an example really whereby if we're going into a big tender opportunity or a big pitch, and we can explain to the developer or the investor, these are the initiatives that we're involved in, then 9 times out of 10, they might ask our competitors also, well, what environmental initiatives are you guys working on, and what social impact initiatives are you guys working on? So as much as it makes a little bit of a difference what we're doing, I'm trying to set an example to the wider industry and make people realize that you can actually do business in a very ethical and conscious way and continue to reinvest your profit in doing good,
No, absolutely. I think it's admirable. And I think, ESG at the moment is like a huge thing, isn't it? It's certainly 10 years ago, it was never really mentioned. And now it's something that's, really key to any development.
Well, it's like pension funds and investment funds are building properties that we need in the country and then renting them back to us. So it's really the duty of those corporate institutions to govern their environmental and social impact. So we as a furnishing business, as a partner to those corporate institutions, can really help them to achieve their ESG goals through the initiatives that we're undertaking, and also set an example for the people that we're in competition with to hopefully encourage them to do something similar.
Yeah, well, hopefully they do. I mean, you mentioned earlier about your reuse and recycling scheme that you have. How does that work? Can you explain a bit more about it?
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning, my dad had a second-hand furniture shop when I was a kid.
So it was in your blood almost.
So we don't throw anything away. That's how I've kind of been brought up, and all the way through this business, we have offered a removal and replacement service in between residential tenancies. So 9 times out of 10, a lot of the furniture that comes out, there's nothing wrong with it. And we're at, I think, 98% landfill avoidance now. Wow, so
impressive.
Yeah, so 100% of our mattresses are recycled. All of our cardboard, metal, wood, plastic, everything is recycled. And any furniture that comes out that can be donated is donated to social housing.
And do you actively look for furniture that's more durable and future-proofed?
We only suggest furniture that will stand up to the tests of a more sort of commercially grade environment. We offer 3-year warranties, 5-year warranties, 5-year particularly in student housing.
Yeah. And you're, from my understanding, Loft does everything from sourcing, design, install and aftercare. And why have you decided to do all of that in-house and not sort of sub it out?
I think just to control the level of quality and the level of engagement of the people that are involved in it, who are sort of aligned with like the integrity of our purpose, if you like, because if you subcontract something, you can't necessarily maintain the same level of quality and attention to detail. It's all grown organically. It's not something that we never planned to have all of these different departments and all of these initiatives, but it's grown in response to the demands of the marketplace, if you like.
And that must presumably benefit your clients if you're a big developer. You're being so vertically integrated. There must be cost savings potentially as well.
Well, if you have your own installation team and your own warehousing and your own design team, then if you're subbing everything out, there's a margin on top of the subcontractual chain. So we definitely can save money in that respect, and also not necessarily get as contractual as you might need to get if you've subbed everything out. If everything's third-party logistics and outsourced labour, it's much more expensive. You can't control the costs as well.
And presumably, as you've grown, that scale enables you to provide better value as you've grown bigger and bigger. Is that the case?
Yeah, there's an economy of scale, and certainly we'd like to think that even though we're doing developments of 800-900 apartments at a time, we can pass that saving on to guys that have only got 8 or 9 bedrooms. It's we're not only working with the larger scale developers in the country, we're also working with a lot of independent landlords as well.
So you do 800 or 900 units in one go?
I think the biggest one we did was about 1,000 apartments in Manchester, Chapel Wharf.
That's impressive.
And it won a lot of awards, that scheme. And it's a lot of apartments to manage. That was with LOFT Living.
So Manchester's flying, isn't it, in terms of new builds?
I think Manchester is the hotspot for build to rent right now.
Yeah.
Super young city, and it's got a huge retention rate from university as well. So that city is growing.
And you see it continuing, do you? Obviously you do.
I mean, like I say, I think the Knight Frank report came out today.
Yeah.
60 odd % of the new build to rent stock is all in Manchester, because it's got a really strong identity, and it's much more cost effective than living in London. So,
no. I mean, I've never invested in Manchester. I think I missed the boat now, probably. But
it's still there's still opportunities everywhere.
Yeah. A good friend of mine's buying up a lot of property up there, and so he'd be happy to hear what you're saying. Yeah. So, I mean, talking about the future a little bit, I mean, where do you see the most innovation? Co-living, multifamily, or later living?
The most innovation?
Yeah.
Probably later living.
Yeah, I thought you might say that.
Yeah, because that is just being considered as a residential asset class now rather than an old people's home.
Yeah.
Later living is a community-focused venture. We haven't done as much in that space as we'd like to, but we're looking at partnering up with a friend of ours, Joe Love from Love Interiors, who's very experienced in that sector, and we can help her with procurement for those type of products. I think that whether you're doing student housing, co-living, multifamily, single family, or later living, or HMO now, the look and feel of the interiors that people are expecting is very sort of consistent.
Yeah.
Everybody wants that sort of Soho home kind of look, and the closest that they can sort of get to that based on their rent affordability is what they're after.
Well, it used to be, didn't it? When you had later living, it was all, you'd see them on Rightmove and they'd be like 150 grand, everything else was 250 grand, and you have to be over 55, and people wouldn't really take much notice of them. But now it's more going the way of having almost like a clubhouse vibe about it, and a much more service-led. Would you agree?
We've been massively influenced by the States, and I think America has those kind of gated communities, and like going back to what inspired me, to live in purpose-built student accommodation in America versus the UK in the mid-90s was just night and day. But now you look at build to rent, it's been around 10 years, and the quality of rented accommodation is way, way higher. And hopefully that's going to have an influence on later living, co-living, and social housing as well.
I think all of the big developments are having a lot more on-site services, aren't they? It's definitely becoming a thing.
Yeah, we did a co-living scheme down in Guildford for Skate Living, and they've got students living in there, and they've got retired people living in there. So co-living is very much a multi-generational.
So Ben, you've obviously got a connection to the Developers Club. How did that come about? What led to that?
So I've known Shiro, one of the founders, for a very long time, and he obviously he knows about Loft, and he knew about our capability. And then he invited me to come and meet with him and Tex, and told me about the plan of trying to create a group of people, to encourage delivering more independent, younger developers to bring more property to the market. And I was fully behind it. So yeah, I've been involved pretty much since day one, really.
Really?
Yeah.
Longer than I have. I've been there a year and a half. So yeah, longer before me.
I mean, I think they came to see me like really early on. It was a blessing, and it's great to see how much it's grown.
Yeah, no, it's flown up. And what value do you think that brings to someone being a member of it?
I just think everybody is stronger together and not separate. And I think that whenever I've been in the boardroom meetings, or whenever I've been in any of the meetings that are associated with the Developers Club, the group has always been very open for sharing sort of best practice and knowledge, and helping one another to navigate the challenges of, modern capitalist society, which isn't necessarily geared up for everybody to succeed. And that's the essence of the group, and that's what we've been really keen to support, because quite often in business, particularly in the UK, everyone's quite separate and, every man for himself type attitude. And I think that, competition is a low vibration and collaboration is a high vibration. So I'd rather stay there. So I'm all about that. Oh, yeah.
And presumably you also get some good feedback from the developers that you meet in the Developers Club, and that you work together.
Yeah, we've done loads of work for lots of the guys that are involved in the club, from show homes to, multiple unit furnishings to HMO stuff, all over the country. We've been actively involved, and that's what we're here to do, to support the guys. But a lot of it from a sort of like mentoring and sort of an experience perspective as well. I'm a bit older than Shiro and Tex, and it is difficult, to start a business and manage growth.
Yeah, and the stresses and strains that come with running a business.
Yeah,
Not easy.
especially a membership club.
Yeah.
Where you've got a duty of care to your members. I think one of the things that's attracted me a lot about the Developers Club is the idea of the foundation and trying to use the knowledge and experience of the members of the Developers Club to try and inspire younger people to come and try and get involved in property who might not necessarily be from particularly privileged backgrounds or might not have gone to particularly exclusive schools, where the Developers Club can inspire you that property is something that you can learn without necessarily having straight A's in your A levels or a first in biochemistry or anything like that. You can literally learn about property from being a teenager, and if you take an interest in property development, adding value, and learn about money early, I think it's that for me is what really inspires me about the Developers Club and the long-term view for what the guys are.
These are critical skills to learn about, aren't they? At the end of the day, they're not easily taught or not easily found.
Yeah.
We're going to talk a little bit about some of your charity exploits in a second, but in terms of Loft, what's the plan for the next 3, 5, 10 years? Where do you see it going?
Well, Loft is about to sort of go global. We've got a design studio in London. We've set up a sales office in Dubai.
Wow.
A trading business in Hong Kong, and we've got a procurement and QC business in Ningbo in China, which is just about 2 hours south of Shanghai. So the build-to-rent model and the student housing model, co-living model from a furnishing perspective is still very, very new globally, internationally. So our plan is just to continue growing in the UK and maintain our service levels and growth for our customers here, but also look to furnish things in Australia and
world domination.
It's not necessarily domination, but we're being asked because multifamily and corporately owned, institutionally owned property is very much an American model.
Yeah.
But that American model now, from an institutional perspective, is going global, and we're seeing that happening in Dubai, in Riyadh, in Kuala Lumpur, in Bangkok, in Hanoi, all over the world, in Australia particularly. So,
in Australia in particular, really.
There's a massive build-to-rent boom in Australia.
Sydney, Melbourne,
Adelaide. Brisbane.
Really?
So the main cities. Well, there just isn't enough quality rental stock on the market. And I think that, more and more now people are struggling to raise up the deposit money to buy a house. And when they do, they can't necessarily live in the area that they want to live in. And if they buy at the wrong end of the macroeconomic cycle, they could be left in negative equity for 10 years in a house that they only bought because they thought that getting on the housing ladder was the right thing to do. So I think renting is definitely becoming a lifestyle choice now for younger people. And the furnishing requirement is there also because of affordability. I think really, people don't own their own furniture if they're renting. So the level of quality of the furniture that needs to be put in has grown. So we're just seeing an international opportunity based on the track record that we've got. There's a big requirement, particularly in the Middle East and Australia.
Dubai is absolutely flying at the moment, isn't it? There's a lot of people doing Airbnb, sort of subletting in Airbnb. I follow a few of them on Instagram.
Yeah, and build to rent, and we'll get there too. Key worker accommodation as well is a big requirement in Dubai. But we have, long-standing relationships with the factories in Asia that we can ship internationally. So it's quite an exciting time. I'm thinking about.
Sounds it.
I'm going to relocate to Hong Kong in the next sort of 6 months.
Really? What made you choose Hong Kong?
Hong Kong is just a really good location in Asia.
To get around, I guess.
A lot of our factories are in Malaysia and Vietnam and China, southern China and sort of, East Coast China. So, and Hong Kong's just an exciting place.
It's a beautiful city, isn't it?
It's like it's got a real history of trade and enterprise. So I just literally got back like 2 days, 3 days ago.
Thanks for coming in with the jet lag. I mean, we've talked a lot about obviously the business side of things, but I know you're very passionate about charity. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your charitable ventures that you have? Yeah,
we're involved in quite a lot of initiatives. I think just touching on the foundation, we're involved in quite a lot of youth initiatives in Manchester locally. Our head office is in Old Trafford, and we do a lot with trying to encourage younger people in that area to sort of think a bit more long term, if you like. And then, we're also involved with a couple of charities that are pushing for, revised government legislation for trying to persuade housing associations and social landlords that furnishing those properties is an essential requirement. Because at the top end, in build to rent and in student accommodation, we provide everything down to bed linen, artwork, rugs and cushions and all of these sort of things. Whereas in social housing, there is no legal requirement to provide carpets or blinds or domestic appliances or furniture. And we're working with a charity at the moment called Zarac, and they have Zarac.org, and they have an initiative called Time for Bed. And the Time for Bed initiative is essentially trying to get a bed into every child that isn't sleeping on a bed in this country. And they've worked out that between, I think, 35 and 40% of children in the major cities in the UK don't actually have a bed to sleep
on sofas, floors, whatever.
In a sleeping bag, on a lilo, on the sofa, whatever. And it's, if you're not having a good night's sleep and you're expected to go to school and perform, it's not possible. So we're involved in lots of youth charity, but also I think that this Time for Bed product will enable investors to measure their social impact, because there's a direct measurement between sleep and attention span and productivity. So hopefully we'll be able to measure that where these beds are donated, we might see an improvement in the graduation percentages of the young people.
Amazing, wouldn't it? Just by providing a bed.
Just by providing a bed, and a bed's not massively expensive. No. But we provide a bed, a mattress, and bed linen, and these are all pre-screened, and it's working together with the schools, and that the teachers are involved in this, where they can see the behavioural traits of kids that might not be able to look after themselves because of the financial position that they're in and things like that. So we want to get more involved in sharing, and also finding ways for the corporates to govern their social impact, which is measurable. And I think that's really important. I think, environmentally, we can measure recycled materials, we can measure FSC wood, we can recycle packaging, we can ship efficiently. So the environmental piece is relatively under control, but I think the social piece has become quite difficult to measure. There's a difference between social value and social impact, and trying to measure social impact can be difficult. But I think one way of doing it is certainly school graduations, and then measuring how many of those people can then get into university.
And presumably also looking at exam results, I guess, as well. GCSEs, I don't know, they still do SATs? It's been changed now. I think showing my age.
I'm not quite. I think is it GCSEs?
GCSEs are at 16, but I think there's SATs at 11. But I mean, they're good ways of measuring, good yardsticks, I guess, for seeing how well kids are doing. So Ben, have you seen any changes in interior trends over the last 20 years?
Yeah, we've seen there's been lots of changes in terms of the attitude of developers towards the way they furnish a property. I think when I first started the business, landlords and developers wanted to furnish their properties as cheaply and as cost effectively as humanly possible, because they were expecting the furniture to get damaged, and there was definitely a different attitude towards the resident than there is today. Fast forward 20 years, and now I think that the more sort of savvy developers are seeing furniture as an asset rather than a cost, and you can sort of measure a direct result on the P&L when your net operating income is increasing, based on the fact that a well-designed and a well-furnished property will rent the apartment or the house more quickly.
Yeah, fewer
voids. So avoid the void, if you like, or reduce, enhance your lease-up speed, which is, we've seen that time and time again. Good design, well dressed, well positioned furniture. You've got to take all of that into consideration. So like spaces today, everybody wants somewhere where they can work, rest, and play at the same time, because more people working from home, stuff like that. And then if the furniture is of good quality and it's comfortable, then the residents will stay a lot longer, which obviously improves your yield because the check-in and the check-out process is the most expensive part. And then also, if you choose well your furniture and you invest in the furniture, then you will reduce your overall sort of maintenance and replenishment costs, which has a direct result on your net operating income. And also you get the added bonus of improving the well-being of your residents, making them comfortable, allowing them to live a better quality of life. And, you know, in student accommodation in particular now, as I think there was a report that came out recently that said 65% of all PBSA was built before 2012. And in 2012, it was very much still a very institutional looking design, you know, big desk, small bed, small wardrobe, not much storage space, not really designed for the way people live today, you know, with digitalization, and people don't necessarily need lots of books because everything's online. So we've been asked to, you know, create spaces that are dark, so people can sleep better, that are quiet. So we're, you know, specifying sort of sound absorption for student bedrooms now.
Wow.
We're specifying sort of ergonomically designed study chairs so people can sit for a long period of time and it won't, you know, damage their back. And then mattresses that are sort of warm in the winter and you can flip it and it's cool in the summer. Wow. And really trying to put some effort into making those student bedrooms more of a sanctuary for sort of relaxation and well-being and studying, rather than, you know, just a box of a high density
But it makes sense, because if you're going to couple that with a really good brand as well that the developer may have, then you can leverage that, can't you, and hopefully achieve, like you say, higher rents.
Yeah, and we're seeing the same, you know, in HMO as well. The most successful HMO investors and the ones with the biggest portfolios are the guys that are putting a lot of effort into their furnishings and interiors. Same with Airbnb. I think a lot of the time, I think today actually in general, it doesn't really matter what you're selling, whether it's furniture or property or any sort of semi-luxury goods. You are selling photography and you are selling an aspirational lifestyle. And, you know, what you don't want to have is a situation where you're showing somebody a picture and then when they arrive and they're disappointed.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've been able to leverage the use of digitalization through creating 3D models of all of the furniture that we produce, and we're able to create CGIs for developers so they can show the apartments for either sale or for rent off plan, or, you know, they can pre-let them. I think, you know, the impact of digitalization and AI on the way that we live needs to be considered when it comes to design, interior design and property design. I think the way that spaces are going to be designed will change over the next sort of 5 or 10 years. And like I said before, you know, spaces have to be functional and flexible for work, rest, and play, literally concurrently, all at the same time, which was never a consideration when I first started the business in 2003, or even 10 years ago. I think the more comfortable you can make your resident, the more profitable your investment will be.
So Ben, there's been massive growth recently in the corporate rented sector. How can a small developer compete with the big corporates, do you think?
The government have definitely launched legislation recently that plays into the hands of the larger corporates. You know, even though they've done away with the multiple dwellings relief, there are, you know, a lot of the legislation seems to be in favour of larger scale corporate investors. I think that if you're an independent developer or you want to get into property, I think it's just important to join a group like the Developers Club, or get involved with the local networking groups for property, you know, listen to the podcasts. Property is something that is available for everybody, despite of what your background might be. You know, if you put the hours in to learn about price per square foot and the rental values in different areas, I think the most successful people that I've worked with in property are those that have been able to budget well and have bought and sold properties at the right times. You know, it's about understanding the macroeconomic climate and using it to your advantage rather than, you know, being scared of it. From a furnishings and interior design perspective, there's lots and lots of ways of adding value to property through interiors that might not necessarily be obvious. Wallpaper, rugs, taking walls out, increasing natural light, just simple things, resanding floors, taking carpets up, making properties look bigger, adding mirrors to the walls, all of these kind of things that we can help you with when it comes to dressing a show home, particularly for, build to sell. There's lots of tricks and there's lots of blogs on our website and lots of information that we've shared with the Developers Club as well on how to make property more appealable either for investors or for renters.
Fantastic. And the other question is, Ben, how can people get in touch with you if they want to reach out to you and your team?
So Loft is pretty well known. It's loft.co.uk.
Yep.
We've got a big showroom up in Manchester, in Old Trafford still. And we have a showroom here in Hanwell in West London. And the Elizabeth line has changed all of our lives.
I bet it has. Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
20 minutes from Bond Street. It's very easy. Yeah, and loft.co.uk is the web domain.
Perfect. So everyone should go to loft.co.uk. Ben?
And loft-living.com is the global brand. And that's
loft-living.com.
Loft-living.com.
Ben, thank you for joining us.
All the best, mate.
I'm Ben Wilson, and this is the Developers Club podcast. Thank you for listening.